Hey everyone, I'm Andrew,
And I'm Emma.
and welcome to All in English Channel.
Today, we're reading and analyzing a very famous short story, one that almost everyone in the world has heard in some form. It's called The Ants and the Grasshopper, and it's one of Aesop's fables.
That's right, and even though this story is very short, we're talking less than 2 minutes to read, it has so much to teach us, not just about life, but about the English language too.
Exactly. In today's episode, we're going to read the story together, explain what happens step by step, look at some great vocabulary, and talk about the characters and why they make the choices they do.
This episode is designed for B1 level learners. That's intermediate English. So if you sometimes feel like stories are a little fast or a little confusing, don't worry, we've got you covered.
All right, Andrew, I think it's time. Are you ready to read?
I am. Okay, everyone, listen carefully. Try to understand the main idea as I read. We'll explain everything after. Here we go. The Ants and the Grasshopper. One bright day in late autumn, a family of ants were bustling about in the warm sunshine, drying out the grain they had stored up during the summer, when a starving grasshopper, his fiddle under his arm, came up and humbly begged for a bite to eat. "What?" cried the ants in surprise. "Haven't you stored anything away for the winter? What in the world were you doing all last summer?" "I didn't have time to store up any food," whined the grasshopper. "I was so busy making music that before I knew it, the summer was gone." The ants shrugged their shoulders in disgust. "Making music, were you?" they cried. "Very well, now dance." And they turned their backs on the grasshopper and went on with their work. There's a time for work and a time for play.
Beautiful. Short, but really powerful.
It really is. You know, every time I read this fable, I think about how much the ants remind me of people I know. Maybe a little too organized, a little too serious, but you have to respect the dedication.
And the grasshopper, he has a fiddle under his arm while he's starving. Only an artist would do that.
Okay, so let's break this story down. Let's start with the plot. What actually happens in this story?
Great. So let's paint a picture of what's happening. First, where are we? The story takes place at the end of autumn. That's the season we call fall in American English, the time of year just before winter, when the leaves are orange and the air gets cold.
And on this particular day, the ants are outside, busy working. They're drying grain. That means they're taking food they saved during the summer and preparing it so it will last through the winter. This is really important because in winter there's no food available outside, so they have to plan ahead.
And then, who shows up? The grasshopper. And notice how the author describes him. He's starving, he has his fiddle under his arm, and he humbly begs for food. He comes to the ants asking for help.
So the ants ask him, "What were you doing all summer? Why didn't you store food?" And the grasshopper's answer is very revealing. He says he was too busy making music. He didn't have time to think about food or winter.
And here's where the story gets interesting. The ants are disgusted. They shrug their shoulders, which is a physical gesture that shows they don't care, and they say something very cold. "Very well, now dance," and they turn their backs and go back to work.
That's a powerful ending. The ants are saying, "You played and made music all summer, so now face the consequences." There's no sympathy, no help, just a harsh lesson.
And the fable ends with its moral, the lesson of the story. There's a time for work and a time for play, which means balance is important. You can't only play, you have to work too.
Exactly. So in simple terms, the ants worked hard and prepared for the future. The grasshopper only enjoyed the present, and when winter came, only one of them was ready.
All right, now let's look at some of the most important and interesting words and expressions in this story. There's some really great vocabulary here.
Let's start with the very first sentence. The author says the ants were bustling about.
Bustling about is such a great expression. To bustle means to move around quickly and busily. It has a lot of energy in it. You can almost picture the ants running around, working hard, going from one place to another. Here's the sentence from the story. A family of ants were bustling about in the warm sunshine. So they're not just walking, they're moving fast, doing lots of things, being very active. You might say, the kitchen was bustling with activity on Thanksgiving morning, or she bustled around the office getting everything ready for the big meeting.
Next word, and this one is very important, starving. The grasshopper is described as starving.
To starve means to suffer because you have no food. It's much stronger than just saying hungry. When you're starving, you're desperately hungry. It's a serious, painful situation. In the story, a starving grasshopper, his fiddle under his arm, came up and humbly begged for a bite to eat. He's not just a little hungry, he's in real trouble.
You could say, after hiking for 6 hours, we were absolutely starving, or millions of people around the world are starving due to drought and poverty. The word has both an everyday casual use and a very serious use. Context tells you which one. Now let's look at humbly begged. These two words together are really important for understanding the grasshopper's attitude in this moment.
To beg means to ask for something urgently, usually because you really need it and have no other choice. And humbly means without pride, in a way that shows you feel small or ashamed. So the grasshopper is asking for help in a very desperate, almost apologetic way. He knows he made a mistake, and it shows.
And right there in the same sentence, a bite to eat. That's a very casual, common English expression that just means a small amount of food. You might say to a friend, "Hey, do you want to grab a bite to eat before the movie?" It's very natural, very conversational.
Okay, now we get to one of my favorite words in the story. The grasshopper whined. To whine is to complain in a sad, high-pitched, weak voice, like a child who doesn't want to go to bed. It's not a flattering description at all. The author is showing us that the grasshopper's explanation sounds pathetic and unconvincing.
"I didn't have time to store up any food," whined the grasshopper. Notice the author uses whined instead of said, and that one word tells us so much about how the grasshopper comes across. Other examples, "Stop whining and just do your homework," or "He whined about the weather the entire trip." We all know someone like that.
Next, shrugged their shoulders in disgust. Let's take this apart. To shrug means to raise and then drop your shoulders. It's a physical gesture that communicates, I don't know, I don't care, or whatever. It's a gesture of complete indifference.
And disgust means a strong feeling of dislike or disapproval when something or someone really bothers you morally or physically. Combined together, shrugged their shoulders in disgust tells us the ants think the grasshopper is foolish and they're not hiding it. You might say, she looked at the messy room in disgust and started cleaning immediately.
And finally, turned their backs on. This is a phrasal verb with a very powerful meaning. Literally, to turn your back on someone means to physically turn around so your back is facing them, showing you're ignoring them. But figuratively, it means to abandon someone, to refuse to help them, to walk away completely.
They turned their backs on the grasshopper and went on with their work. In other contexts, she turned her back on her old friends when she became famous, or we can't turn our backs on people who need help. It's a phrase that is both physical and deeply emotional at the same time.
That's such a rich expression. Okay, let's talk about where this story comes from, because the context really adds a lot to our understanding.
This story is one of Aesop's fables. Aesop was a storyteller who is believed to have lived in ancient Greece around 600 BCE. That's over 2,600 years ago. We don't know many details about his life, but his fables have survived for thousands of years and have been told all over the world in almost every language.
A fable, by the way, is a very specific type of short story. Fables have two key features. First, the characters are usually animals, but they talk and act like humans. Second, every fable ends with a moral, a clear lesson or message about how to live. And that's exactly what we see here.
The ants and the grasshopper are animals, but they represent different types of people. The ants represent hard-working, responsible people who plan for the future. The grasshopper represents someone who lives only for the present, who enjoys life now without thinking about tomorrow.
It's also worth noting that the story uses the seasons as symbols. Summer represents a time of abundance, opportunity, and youth, when life is good and there's time for pleasure. Winter represents hardship, difficulty, and scarcity, when life gets tough. The ants understood this cycle. The grasshopper did not.
Okay, now let's talk about the two characters more deeply, because they're actually more complex than they might seem on the surface.
Let's start with the ants. On the surface, they seem like the heroes of the story. They worked hard, they saved food, they're prepared for the future. But look at how they respond to the grasshopper. They're cold, they mock him. Very well, now dance. They turn their backs. There's no compassion, no offer to help even a little.
So the question becomes, are the ants admirable or are they cruel? The fable seems to celebrate them, but many readers feel uncomfortable with their response. Is it right to let someone suffer just because they made poor choices?
And then there's the grasshopper. Yes, he was irresponsible. He didn't prepare. But look at what he was doing. He was making music. He was creating art. He was contributing beauty to the world. Is that really so wrong?
This fable has been interpreted very differently throughout history. The traditional interpretation says, work hard, plan ahead, be responsible. But a more modern interpretation might say, the story is too harsh. It has no room for creativity, pleasure, or the value of art in society.
Some people even argue we need both kinds of people. We need the ants, the builders, the planners, the workers, but we also need the grasshoppers, the musicians, the artists, the dreamers. A world with only ants would be very efficient, but very sad.
That's a really beautiful way to put it. And this is what makes Aesop's fables so powerful, even after 2,600 years. They don't just give us simple answers, they make us think.
Exactly. The moral says there's a time for work and a time for play. And that's actually a message of balance, not just work is good, play is bad. The grasshopper's mistake wasn't making music. It was making music at the wrong time, without any balance.
Okay, let's bring everything together. Today, we read The Ants and the Grasshopper, one of Aesop's most famous fables, over 2,600 years old.
We learned about the plot. The ants worked all summer and saved food for winter. The grasshopper played music all summer and then begged for help when winter came. The ants refused, and the grasshopper learned a very hard lesson.
We practiced some fantastic vocabulary. Do you remember all of them? We had bustling about, starving, humbly begged, a bite to eat, whined, store up, shrugged in disgust, and turned their backs on. These are all expressions you can use in real English conversations.
And we talked about the characters, the responsible but perhaps cold ants, and the creative but irresponsible grasshopper. Neither one is completely right or completely wrong.
Now here's our question for you, and we really want to hear your answer. Leave it in the comments below. Do you think the ants did the right thing by refusing to help the grasshopper, or do you think they were too harsh?
There's no wrong answer here. This is about your opinion. We read every single comment and we love hearing what you think, so don't be shy.
And if you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like. It really helps the channel grow so we can keep making content like this for you every week.
Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new episode.
Thank you so much for watching. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Emma.
And this is All in English Channel. See you next time.